بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. We did this, I believe. I think I did all of this. Oh, we didn't do this part. Let's start from the beginning, just for the barakah, inshallah. So it says, في الجنابة وتطهر لها. حدثنا زيادة بن أيوب قال حدثنا وكيع عن هشام بن عروة عن أبيه عن زينب بنت أم سلمة عن أمها قالت جاءت أم سليم إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فسألته عن المرأة ترى في المنام ما يرى الرجل، فقال إذا رأت الماء فلتغتسل. قالت فقلت فضحت النساء وهل تحتلم المرأة؟ فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تربت يمينك فبما يشبهها ولدها إذن. Right, we did this last week. And we did a whole discussion about Urwa ibn Zubayr, Hisham, etc. حدثنا حسن بن محمد الزعفراني قال حدثنا حماد بن خالد الخياط عن عبد الله العمري عن عبيد الله عن القاسم عن عائشة قالت سئل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الرجل يجد البلل ولا يذكر الاحتلام قال يغتسل، وعن الرجل يرى أنه قد احتلم ولا يجد بللا قال لا غسل عليه. حدثنا أبو يحيى محمد بن سعيد العطار وإسحاق بن إبراهيم بن عبد الرحمن عن حماد بن خالد بهذا الإسناد نحوه، وزاد فقالت أم سليم يا رسول الله وهل على المرأة ترى في من ذلك شيئا؟ قال نعم إن النساء شقائق الرجال. حدثني يعقوب بن إبراهيم الدورقي. So who can just remind me quickly? What does that mean then? What does this mean? إن النساء شقائق الرجال. You can remind us from last week. They're the same. Amara is a very male response. As 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 curt as possible. They both have desires. That's true. They both have desires. Okay. Can anybody else elaborate a little bit more? Okay. So is it true that women are a fitna for men, but men are not a fitna for women?
No.
Not true, right? Should a woman be shocked if she finds that her husband is attracted to somebody besides her?
No.
No. Should a man be shocked if his wife is attracted to a man besides him?
No.
No. It's like grow up, Habibi, right? So there's two levels of immaturity that, as we mentioned last week. One is, oh, that would never be the case. Why would that ever be the case? Right? That's because you're immature and you don't know, you know, you don't know what's going on. So therefore you might be too chill about how interactions are, you might be whatever. The other side is, oh my God, right? I just looked, I saw my wife, and I saw her eyes dilate when this man walked past, and I saw her looking away. I realized she's attracted. She's a really bad woman, right? That's also immature. You're very immature. It's like that's just reality, right? That's reality. So alhamdulillah, your wife looks away, and that's what else are you supposed to expect, right? That's all you can expect. She is shaqa. Just like the kind of thoughts that go in your head, the kind of thoughts that go in her head, 100% the same, right? And I remember there was a statistic in England. They said men think about sex every 3 seconds, right? So if that's true, the same as women. There's no right. The pathways that things go through are slightly different, but they're the same. It's not a so both of these things are both levels of immaturity result in lots of harm, lots of problems, right? I don't think subconsciously, no. Consciously, right? I don't know if that's actually true. That's probably a hyperbole, but the point is, yeah, that's a bit stupid. But the point is, you know, if it were true, it's true of both. It's not something like, oh, men are like that, right? Men are like that. Women are like that too. There's no different. So, the again, the pathways are different, right? How that all fits together, right? How this relates to that, and but it's basically the same thing, right? So be mature and have a healthy relationship and grow up, basically. Um, okay, بسم الله. حدثني يعقوب بن إبراهيم الدورقي قال حدثنا عثمان بن عمر قال حدثنا يونس عن الزهري قال كان رجال من الأنصار منهم أبو سعيد الخدري وأبو أيوب يقولون الماء من الماء, meaning you only have to make ghusl if something comes out, as opposed to intercourse itself does not cause ghusl, right? Right. وجوب استعمال الماء منحصر في خروج الماء. Does that make sense? Right? Water is from water, meaning you only have to use water when something comes out. ويزعمون أنه ليس على من مس امرأته غسل ما لم يمنه. Aha. What does massa mean here? What's the verbal noun of massa? وليس على من مس امرأته. It means intercourse. Good. And what is the verbal noun then? What is the verbal noun? What's the masdar of massa, which when it means intercourse? So massa yamassu massan means to touch. Massa yamassu. Where's our ChatGPT buddies? Who uses ChatGPT a lot? Let's see if our ChatGPT can answer this question. Joa, do you use AI a lot?
Not particularly, but I have it handy.
Okay, so Bismillah, let's ask ChatGPT. When massa, I don't know, means intercourse, what is the verbal noun in Arabic? Somebody else can grab their hands via. We will have hands via, inshallah. Zafar, you have hands here? Yeah, go ahead, Jawad. Any answer?
Yeah, it says masun.
Yeah. So the word is masis. Masis. Al-masis is intercourse, right? So fa'il is sometimes used for verbal nouns of motion, like rahil, traveling away, dabib, to crawl, right? It's called fa'il, on fa'il. It's used for sounds, sahil al-faras, right? The neighing of a horse. It's also used for motion. Rahil, trying to think of something else. Masis. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's not Allahu, and that's not correct. Masis, right? And مسيس الحاجة. Okay. مسيس الحاجة. I think that might have a different sense though there. I don't think that's مسيس. Allahu Alam. Maybe. But anyway, مسيس means intercourse, right? مسيس. So here, yeah. So that's what it says. وإذا مس امرأته غسل ما لم يمني, as long as it does not ejaculate. فلما ذكر ذلك لعمر وعائشة وابن عمر أبوا ذلك، فقالوا إذا مس الختان الختان فقد وجب الغسل. فقال سهل الأنصاري وقد أدرك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو ابن وهو ابن 15 سنة في زمانه. حدثني أبي بن كعب رضي الله عنه أن الفتية الذي. I'm not sure why it's الذي. So futya is feminine. Because on the pattern فعلى, right? Like bushra, dhikra, right? Whenever you have an extra alif maqsoor, it makes it feminine. So I'm not sure why it's saying الذي. على كل وأن الفتية الذي كانوا يقولون الماء من الماء كانت رخصة رخص بها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في أول الإسلام. ثم أمر بالاغتسال بعد afterwards. وقد كان عبد الملك بن مروان أخذ بذلك عن رجل من الأنصار فلما بلغه العلم اغتسل وأمر بالاغتسال. Okay. Can somebody just post on the WhatsApp group that the class has started? Inshallah. خير. So that was a rukhsa, right? So here's this kind of thing that you're going to find is here it's fairly clear, but you're going to find other things among the Sahaba that there is a qawl shadh that they had, and it's kind of widespread for some time, right? Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he was the governor of Medina, right? He was the governor of Medina, and then he became the Khalifa, right? Um, so we find he's mentioned a lot in the Muwatta, etc. But as you find things took time to settle. So what will happen today is somebody finds a Sahih hadith and just follows it, even though it goes against the vast majority of the Sahaba and Tabi'een, and they're in reality because they all agreed against something, right? He says حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا عبد الصمد بن عبد الوارث وأبو نعيم قال حدثنا هشام. This is a Distawai, not Hisham ibn Urwa. Distawai. عن الدستوائي with a فتحة. دستوائي. Somebody could double check. Almost certain it's الدستوائي. عن قتادة ابن دعامة السدوسي عن الحسن البصري عن أبي رافع عن أبي هريرة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. What is the hadith then? Oh, قال وحدثنا وهب بن جرير قال حدثنا شعبة عن قتادة, so he has another chain, عن الحسن عن أبي رافع عن أبي هريرة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا قعد بين شعبها الأربع ثم اجتهد, right? So this, I don't think that's a real word there. قال عبد الصمد وأبو نعيم ثم جهدها, not اجتهد. I don't, that's not really because اجتهد is to kind of take on something to yourself, right? Whereas jahadaha That's more the meaning. So here, when he sits between her four branches, i.e., two legs and two arms, right? Um, okay. حدثنا سليمان بن شعيب المصري قال حدثنا بشر يعني ابن بكر قال حدثني الأوزاعي قال حدثني عبد الرحمن بن قاسم, right? We know the story. عبد الرحمن ibn Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, right? We know the whole story there. عن أبيه عن عائشة أنها سئلت عن رجل يجامع ولا ينزل قالت فعلت أنا ورسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فاغتسلنا منه جميعا, right? So a hadith like this, for example, this is, there's another whole issue is that people, they genuinely, there's this book by Freud. I think it's actually really, really good. I didn't read the whole thing properly. I just kind of like skimmed through it, but I think it's really, really good. And it's called Totem and Taboo, right? Totem and Taboo by Freud. And, just reading it, I found it very, very revelatory. I know Freud has obviously some really messed up ideas about Allah and religion, etc. But a lot of his things are very true. So people do have like really messed up ideas about things, and he shouldn't really speak about whether God exists or not. That's a whole different discussion. But basically, like they do superimpose really weird taboos on sexuality and on godhood and things like that. So it's really important that people just read the seerah, read hadith, read the Quran, and just become comfortable, a level of comfortableness with sexuality. A lot of ethnic Muslims are really not comfortable. Like this hadith is shocking, right? Because basically, imagine if your mum, right, Aisha radiallahu anha is bithabati ummina, right? She's like our mother, right? And she's saying, oh yeah, this happened, and you find many of the Salaf, explaining things like that. So it's kind of like they're just really, really not comfortable. And they kind of like it is genuinely a taboo. And one of the really interesting things Freud mentions is about ambivalence, the ambivalence of emotions. Where, for example, somebody will be like really like um they will do things when their feeling is the opposite. So, for example, they'll mourn the dead, like when it do extreme ways of mourning the dead, right? When they actually really hate the dead person. And it's a way of dealing with the ambivalence, the weird complex. So many people that when sexuality are like that, right? You'll see like some sister or some brother who's like super, super strict about gender interactions. And the reason is because they're super into the opposite sex, right? And it's a problem. So the way that they respond to it is not healthy. It's not balanced, you know? So again, I always repeat this concept, this maturity. Brother, it doesn't matter. It's my sister. It's like, it does matter, right? The default is attraction. So if you're cognizant of that the default is attraction, and that should direct the way you interact with the opposite sex. But at the same time, just be real, Habibi. Okay, it is the default. You have to the default is attraction. That's true. But also the default is I have to work with this lady. I have to work with this man. I have to buy from the shop. I have to, what am I going to do about it? Just grow up. Like, yeah, it's true. Thoughts like that could go across your head. That's true. But move on. It's like, oh my God, I had doubts about Allah. Yeah, that can happen. Move on. Right. You know, so someone's like, oh, I'm a kafir because I had a grudge against my dad, and that's disrespect, and that means it's like, Habibi, you're a person. It's okay. You made mistakes. Move on. Right. So they have this very, very unhealthy relationship with intimacy, and it's not good. Right. So Catholics have a lot of these issues. Um, so they will be like 100% doing the haram, but when they get married, they can't do stuff because it's like, oh, they only see it in a bad way, you know? And those who speak Urdu or Farsi, right, there's a certain word you will use for intercourse, which is indicative of that. They have a very negative word for it, which is indicative of this trauma and this taboo. Like it only exists in a taboo. So it's something that's really bad. And it's just kind of like, it's kind of how is this even okay, Whereas we say it's bad in this way and it's good in this way. This is sunnah and halal, but private. right? Sunnah and halal and good, but private. That's all. Simple as that, right? And so people have there's a major problem, right? A major problem that people have. Um, and again, I repeat that concept: the ambivalence of emotions is that this person who will be the strictest person when it comes to the opposite sex, the reason is because they're like super into the opposite sex, right? And obviously that can be healthy, meaning like, oh my God, this is a major fitna for me. I want to avoid it. But it's not that. Like the way that they'll talk about it. Let's say, for example, there'll be a lady, for example, she's like super, like she really wants to be intimate, okay? And in her mind, thoughts come into her mind a lot. So now she, for example, if she sees her son looking at a girl, she'll get really angry with him. Does that make sense? So it's like there's a problem. It's like, well, this lady should be married, right? You can't have multiple husbands, right? And you can't be sexually active all the time with a bunch of men. That's not halal. But maybe these thoughts that are coming to her, which is natural. That's a natural thought to have, right? And she just needs to channel it in a healthy way. She doesn't channel it in a healthy way, so then she's always on this on the issue on her husband's case or on her son's case, or you know, um, her daughter has to wear a niqab from the age of 2 or something like that, and it's like, whoa, the way they deal with it is because they are like super into that stuff. They become really, really extreme, right? Does that make sense? So it shouldn't be like that. It's like, yeah, this is a reality. Yeah, 100% reality. But yeah, you know, just give an example of it. Like, my son who last year, right? So I think he was 9, right? So he's 9. He's on a 125cc motorbike. Okay. So a 9-year-old on 125cc motorbike, is that dangerous? Do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of dangerous, right? So my son asked me, said, Daddy, is this dangerous? I said, yeah, it is dangerous. It's dangerous, right? So, and I told him, I said, Habibi, look, you can when you get into first gear, right? I can run in front of him. I was running in front of him, I was training him how to get into neutral, get into, it was, get into neutral, get into first gear, right? And then as I'm telling him, Habibi, this is now how it's not very nice. Like when you're going in first gear, it's kind of like the bike's kind of like trying to, it doesn't feel very nice. I said, now we're going to go into second gear. Okay. When you go into second gear, I cannot catch up with you. I will not be able to catch up with you. You're going to be going 20, 30, 40 miles an hour. You go around the neighborhood, I will not be able to catch you. If you go around the corner quickly and a car hits you, there's nothing I can do. So you see, this is like, I'm not being fake about the danger. We're just embracing the danger. This is reality. You want to do this, don't do this, right? Like, this is a reality. So, like, yes, the opposite sex is a fitna. Yes. Okay. Let's move on. Let's let's just work with that as opposed to I can't function. I can't function. Like, oh my God, you just said that word. And it's like, well, here we go. Here's our mother telling us that, yeah, this is what happened. We did this, right? Excuse me, we did this. The language you use is like, imagine, imagine if it's just almost like, oh my God, that happened, right? But here, these people, they speak in a comfortable way. They speak in a comfortable way. They are comfortable with sexuality, right? That's really important. There's another hadith, I don't know where it is, where the Prophet ﷺ, he comes and he tells Fatima, says, oh, Fatima, he's traveling. So, Fatima, I need to make ghusl, just get me a towel. So he makes ghusl in the middle of the street. It's like, oh my God, he made ghusl. Like, it's okay. The Prophet ﷺ is about to lead the prayer, and the Prophet says, oh, I need to make ghusl. I'm a human like you. I need to make ghusl. Like, comfortable with sexuality, right? They're comfortable with sexuality, right? Polygamy, right? Like, oh my God, my husband wants a second wife. So yeah, well, isn't that fairly normal, right? That's fairly normal, right? Like, that's not a problem. Oh, that means I'm this. It's like, no, it doesn't. Oh, that means this. No, it doesn't. That's just how men are. It's like, yeah, just be comfortable with things, right? So many people, they live in this world where they're not comfortable with reality, right? And they kind of like And it's just like, no, it's like, this is reality. Yes, there's a danger. Yes, there's a problem. Yes, there's a, I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. I can't function. It's like, yeah, that's just reality, right? Like, reality is I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm a firefighter. Every single day, I don't know if I'm going to come back alive. You know, that's just instead of like living in this trauma, like, don't talk about the fact that daddy's a firefighter. Don't talk about this. Don't do this. No, just like embrace it, right? Sit with it. It's like, this is reality. Why is daddy a firefighter? Why is that dangerous? Why would you do that? Say, oh, okay, khair. Move on. Okay. Does it make sense, inshallah?
Yes.
Right? So, Zafar, Ammar, Jawad, you guys are all Indo-Pak, right?
Yes.
Would you agree there's a lot of kind of like that way of thinking, right? It's like a Catholic way of thinking. It's like it's either like really bad, people do lots of really bad stuff, or it's like hush hush, don't talk about it, and it's really awkward.
Yeah. Many
Yeah.
Catholic
How
believe
how would you like, I guess, suggest like a way to kind of start breaching that subject, or like make normalizing like the discussion surrounding it?
Well, one way you don't do it is go up to your father-in-law and say, "Hey, Dad, let's talk about," and be like, "That's not appropriate, right? That's really weird." So, but generally, ilm, right? So when you just see hadith, read the seerah, right? So many people read the hadith, read the Quran, right? People don't read the Quran. Like people are shocked, like the theme of sex. How many times does it come up in the Quran? It's like comes up a lot. It's like, oh my God, you know, again and again and again. It's like, oh my God, it's like a huge issue. There's a famous Egyptian literary figure called his name Mahfouz, Naguib Mahfouz. Mahfouz is a famous Egyptian literary figure. Every single book that he writes deals with three things. It deals with politics, it deals with money, and it deals with sex. Because why? Because that is basically the dunya. The hayat dunya is kind of like those three things, like power, money, and the opposite sex. Like that's basically how the dunya works, right? So you can imagine people functioning where they are cognizant but not cognizant of like a third of their dunyawi existence, right? It's there but it's not there. It's like we don't talk about that, you know, like we don't talk about it. Like we don't talk about politics, right? It's like when you're living in a communist state, you're living in a the whatever it is. It's like we don't talk about politics. Like it's not healthy, right? Or like finances are a problem and you don't talk about money. It's like that's not good, right? Exactly, right? So my class, D Femina, that's a bit hardcore. I don't really advise that many. I don't advise the average person to do that because I think it's too blunt. Yeah, it's too blunt. But if you just exposure to the seerah, exposure to hadith, exposure to the Quran, just actually reading the Quran, right? It'll be like, oh, this theme comes up. It's not something weird, you know. And then some people they generally need they generally need actually therapy, right? Because they actually it's going to be it's a problem that they can't just get over. B, it's going to obviously be affecting their lives on many levels, right? Go ahead, Amar.
to what extent with ilm or just in general, is there an adab of like using certain words or like euphemisms in that sense? Because like for the Quran, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't come out and just use like the very crass words. Like he says,
Well,
فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ or,
okay, fine, but
فَأْتُوهُنَّ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ.
there's certain words that would be more quote unquote crass. A'udhu billah, I'm not going to say that, you can never say that about the Quran, but there's certain words that have been more explicit in the hadith and in the Quran than
Right.
they are in English, right? Like if I sat down and explained the hadith to the Prophet to my aunt, okay, I'm sitting down and I say, oh, yeah, the Prophet Muhammad, he spoke about this, and this woman came and said, Ya Rasulullah, this happened, this happened, this happened. The Prophet said, no, until you taste his honey and he tastes yours. Like, whoa, that's pretty explicit in English, you know? That's kind of like, it's not explicit, but it's pretty explicit, right? Even the word like dakhala, you know? Like it's like, what does dakhala mean? It's like, whoa, like to enter. It's like, it's pretty explicit, right? For in English,
Yeah, fair
right?
enough. I
So
guess I'm just thinking in contrast to like what jahili poetry
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
no, but Jahili poetry isn't that. It's not that much. So we have to understand what happened in the West. Okay, what happened in the West. So again, when we're talking about Muslims, I don't know how if Arabs have that much problem with it, but certainly Indo-Pak is a problem because they're kind of like it's almost it's like Catholic way of thinking about things, right? It's not healthy. Maybe modern Pakistan is slightly different. Who knows? Allahu A'lam. But there's this kind of issue there. Um, but if you look at so in the West, what happened was um, number one, there's just the whole way that Christianity looks at sexuality, which is problematic. But in the West, if you look up until Shakespeare's time, it's actually all over the place. Like Shakespeare talks about sex all the time. It's like all not an issue. Like in Hamlet, Hamlet tells Ophelia, right, his wife, take thee to a monastery, like go to a whorehouse. That's what it means. A monastery, like that was a sorry, a nunnery. A nunnery was a euphemism for a whorehouse, for a brothel. And it's like, whoa, like that was like normal. So that in Shakespeare, there's lots of sexual innuendos like all the time. And even like just discussions about things. Chaucer is really bad, right? Geoffrey Chaucer, Canterbury Tales, it's really bad. So what happened then is in the West, it got toned down over the last few hundred years. Like you can't say that. So they would do the Shakespeare plays in a different way, refer to things in a different way, explain things in a different way, even though it was like just out there. Beowulf, sex is a major issue in Beowulf, right? It's there in ancient Greece. You're like, that was a kind of thing, right? The Romans and the Greeks were like, pretty immoral people. So it's kind of just out there. So it all got toned down. And so we think so in the English culture that we have today, the language that we use, we just couldn't say things, right? I'll give you an example. There was this article a long time ago I read, which was unique vocabulary to do with nature that we've lost, right? When people are not so used to nature, they don't have these certain terms. So like a frozen stream that's going down on the other side of the valley that you can see the light of the sun on. Like there's a word for it in English, right? All these different things. So anyway, I was reading this and it was like, yeah, they used to call a kestrel, right? A wind F dot dot dot. And I was like, whoa. Uh, so a kestrel, what it does is it hovers in the wind. Okay. So it will just be there. It'll just be hovering and waiting for the mouse to come out or the rabbit to come out. So it's just there bobbing in the wind. And they called it a wind F dot 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 dot. I was like, whoa. So that's just a word they use for it, you know? They didn't, there's no one's trying to be rude, which that's just a word. It's like, so there's lots of things in English or in Western culture as of the last few hundred years where everything's a bit more calm, right? And so the 60s and what we find now is kind of a reaction to that, plus a whole reaction to Christianity and all those things there, right? But let's just talk about us, which is usually, right? Most Muslims, at least that I talk to, is like Indo-Pak, right? It's a problem, you know. It's kind of like you can't that's not it's just not, it's like there's a lot of situations where again you'll have people who they could only look at that thing in the haram way, but when it comes to the halal, it is innately bad, right? So then when you hear Aisha radiallahu anha saying, you know just these words, like whoa, right? Again, even translate this to English, Ammar, right? It's like that's like whoa, that's crazy. People, you might even cause people iman issues, right? Because they'd be like, oh my God, like it's like inappropriate, like how could the Prophet say that? How could his wife say that? So they think their perception of what is right and wrong and what is good and bad and the way they see it is so off that they would actually almost like have an imani issue that if you show them how as it was. So anyway, what I do is um identify the problem and then encourage people, read the Quran, read the Hadith, read the Seerah, right? And you're going to see these issues are going to come up, and when possible, and we bring it up with certain people. Some people it's It's just very, very hard, very, very hard to even get past those things. But it causes huge problems, right? Huge problems. Like it's not a small problem. So again, like I repeat, like the dunya, right? So the deen comes along and tells us how to navigate the dunya, but the dunya is basically those three things. So if in your mind, right, if in your mind, sex isn't an issue, money isn't an issue, power isn't an issue, you're not really here. You're kind of like a yogi. You're kind of like, you're not really thinking about things. So Islam came along and said, this is the hayat ad-dunya. These are these three things. How do I navigate these things? Not how do I ignore these things, right? It's not ignoring life. Oh, ignore politics, right? Separation from, a church from states. Like, that's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong, right? It's like, no, it's like, how does church inform state, right? So that's important. You can't separate these things. You come into the office and you say, just the way that women dress in the office, the fact that she got the job, the fact that she dresses like this, the fact that they do this, like obviously sex is part of this meeting. So when we say women dress in a modest way, you've now eliminated that. That shouldn't be part of the meeting. My interaction with you, sister, at work, that sex shouldn't be part of it, or at least should be reduced as much as possible. It's obviously there because I'm a man and you're a woman, but we're going to reduce it as much as possible, right? But suddenly, here's a woman, she's dressed as she dresses in the office, and it's kind of like, well, you can't cut that out of the relationship. You can't cut this out of this conversation because it's there in my face, right? The fact that I'm going to hire her, the fact that I'm going to agree with her, all of these things, it's women use it as a power, right, which is very low, and people who all sorts of things. So this is how the dunya is. The deen comes and talks about these things. Any deen that doesn't talk about these three things is just not talking to you. It's not even talking to you. It's not organizing these things at all. Inshallah, don't want to linger too much. خير. Let's continue. So it says حدثنا عبد الله بن هاشم قال حدثنا يحيى يعني بن سعيد. We did this last week. And شعبة قال حدثني عمرو بن مرة عن عبد الله بن سلمة قال أتيت عليا أنا ورجلان من قومي ورجل من بني أسد أحسب I believe فبعث هما وجها فقال إنكما علجان فعالجا عن دينكما ثم خرج المخرج فتهيأ ثم خرج فأخذ جفنة من ماء فتمسح بها ثم جعل يقرأ فكأنما أنكرنا عليه فقال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقضي حاجته ثم يخرج فيقرأ القرآن ونأكل معه اللحم ولا يحجزه وربما قال لا يحجبه عن ذلك شيء ليس الجنابة أي إلا الجنابة. So this hadith has been debated, is it sahih or not? Right? So at the beginning of the hadith, the point is this point here, right? كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقضي حاجته. He used to go to the bathroom, right? And then he used to recite Quran, and he used to eat meat. He didn't have to have wudu to eat meat, etc. And the only thing that would stop him from reciting Quran, etc., would be janaba itself. Okay, so the majority of scholars, obviously, we say that you can't recite Quran in janaba. Ibn Mundhir of the Shafi'is, he said this hadith is weak. Here, Abdullah ibn Salima, he's not strong. Sorry, Amr ibn Murrah, I believe. This was here, Amr ibn Murrah, if I remember correctly. Maybe somebody could look in the Awsat and see what Ibn Mundhir said. I believe it was here, Amr ibn Murrah. He said he's not a thiqah. So it's not a sahih hadith. Therefore, there's no dalil that you cannot recite Quran in janaba. Therefore, you can recite Quran in janaba, right? So that's the position of Ibn Mundhir. I believe it's also the Zahiris, right? But the position of the Jumhur is you cannot recite Quran in janaba. قال يحيى كان شعبة يقول في هذا الحديث تعرف here we go تعرف وتنكر يعني أن عبد الله ibn Salima كان كبيرا حيث أدركه عمرو. So yeah, it was Abdullah ibn Salima. Right, so the Salama and Salima, not the same name. Right, Abdullah ibn Salima. So he said, تعرف وتنكر. You know, you find things that he narrates that make sense, other things he doesn't. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. He's not a very good narrator. حدثنا عبد الله بن هاشم. So please somebody look this up in the Awsat, see what write it down if you're not going to look it up. Ibn Mundhir in the Awsat, also have a look, see what Ibn Hazm says in the Muhalla, and have a look at that, inshallah. Others say the hadith is strong enough, and again, it's supported by the fatwa, vast majority of the fuqaha. حدثنا عبد الله بن هاشم ومحمود بن آدم قال حدثنا سفيان عن عبد الله بن دينار. Which Sufyan is this?
Uyayna.
100%, right? Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Okay, because look at where he is in the chain, who he's narrating from, etc. So there's these two scholars. One is in Mecca, one's in Medina. One is Abdullah ibn Dinar, who is in Medina. The other one is Amr ibn Dinar in Mecca. I believe Sufyan narrates from both of them, right? So Abdullah ibn Dinar, Amr ibn Dinar. I think both of them pass away in 125, as far as I remember, right? And they're عن ابن عمر قال سأل عمر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أينام أحدنا وهو جنب قال ليتوضأ ولينام وليطعم إن شاء. Right, so the ظاهر of the hadith is can one of us sleep? And the Prophet said, let him make wudu. The ظاهر is for the ظاهر is for that it is for wujub, right? You have to make wudu, and then you have to sleep, and then you have to eat if he wishes. Right, and so we're going to say no, that's not true. It is not haram to to sleep or eat if you're in janaba. And we're going to see evidence of that as well later on. Right, and one of the evidences is that wudu does not take the place of ghusl. So, given that nothing really changed, it can't obviously be obligatory. Wallahu a'lam. And if somebody can have a look in the Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd, right? Tabaqat Ibn Sa'd, there's a hadith, I believe it mentions لا يحضرني جبريل. I believe that's the words. لا يحضرني جبريل, something like that. Which is the Prophet ﷺ, was scared. He said, he was always keen to sleep, not to sleep in janaba, because he said, I was scared that if I die, Sayyidina Jibreel will not be present, right? So it may be the case, wallahu alam, that Sayyidina Jibreel is present with us when we pass away, and that he is not present with us when we don't make ghusl, right? And you sleep in janaba, wallahu alam. So somebody can have a look there. I'm pretty sure it's in the Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd. So Tabaqat Ibn Sa'd is not a hadith book, but it's full of hadith, right? It's like many books are like that, full of hadith. حدثنا إسحاق بن منصور قال حدثنا يحيى بن سعيد قال حدثنا حميد عن بكر عن أبي رافع عن أبي هريرة أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لقيه وهو جنب قال فانخنست, right? خناس, I slunk away. فاغتسلت ثم جئت فقال أين كنت أو أين ذهبت قلت إني كنت جنبا قال إن المسلم لا ينجس, right? It's not haram. You cannot. It's not bad to be around me. You're still in. You yourself don't become filthy. You're just in a filthy state. حدثنا أحمد بن يوسف قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق قال حدثنا سفيان عن الأعمش. Sufyan عن الأعمش. Which Sufyan is this? So Amash is which city? Kufi, yeah. So Amash is Kufi. Sufyan al-Thawri, Kufi. It's possible. But I believe Sufyan al-Thawri is more of the same kind of tabaqa as al-A'mash. Right? Do they both narrate from al-A'mash? It's possible. Right? But I would hazard a guess that this is Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Right? Sufyan ibn Uyayna. This is what I would guess. Allahu a'lam. So Abd al-Razzaq as-San'ani, did he narrate from Sufyan al-Thawri? I don't think so. Right? So I'm looking at this. This is Abd al-Razzaq as-San'ani. This is kind of the same time as Imam Shafi'i. Right? This is the same time as Imam Malik. Right? This is the same time as Imam Abu Hanifa. Right? So Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Sufyan al-Thawri is a little bit younger than Imam Abu Hanifa, but same time-ish. So this I would imagine him to be here. I don't know how much Sufyan al-Thawri narrates from al-A'mash. I don't know how much he does. Allahu a'lam. But I would hazard a guess that this is Sufyan ibn Uyayna, right? So Imam Shafi's students, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, right? 1, 2, 3, right? Between them, like 1, 2, 3, approximately, like 2 to 3 people between that generation and the next, and the Prophet sallallahu right? Allahu a'lam. عن الأعمش عن سالم بن أبي جعد عن كريب, right? This is the famous Kurayb that mentioned that hadith from, that narrates the hadith from Ibn Abbas about having Ramadan on different dates, right? عن ميمونة, his aunt, قال سترت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فاغتسل من الجنابة. Right? I covered him, perhaps held a towel for him, whatever it was. حدثنا ابن مقرئ قال حدثنا السفيان, definitely not Sufyan al-Thawri. عن أيوب بن موسى عن سعيد بن أبي سعيد المقبري عن عبد الله بن رافع مولى أم سلمة عن أم سلمة أنها قالت يا رسول الله إني امرأة أشد ضفر رأسي أفأنقضه لغسل الجنابة قال إنما يكفيك أن تحثي, to throw over, عليه 3 حثيات من ماء ثم تفيضي عليك الماء فتطهري, أو قال فإذا أنت قد طهرتي. Okay. So the issue is do you have to get inside the water? And so as long as the water reaches, right? As long as the water reaches, then it's fine, right? So ashuddu dhafar ra'si, I have braids, right? So as long as the water gets inside, that's fine. And there's more details there in fiqh as well. حدثنا عبد الله بن هاشم قال حدثنا يحيى بن سعيد عن هشام قال أخبرني أبي, so this is definitely Hisham ibn Urwa عن عروة بن زبير عن عائشة عن غسل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من الجنابة قالت كان يبدأ بيديه فيغسلهما ثم يتوضأ وضوءه للصلاة ثم يخلل أصول شعرة رأسه. So sha'ra by default would mean one hair. So it's a little bit odd. Sha'r is hair. Sha'ra, one hair. Right? The usul of the one hair of his head. It sounds a little bit odd. حتى إذا ظن أنه قد استبرأ البشرة, right? That the water has got inside. اغترف 3 غرفات, he would take 3 scoops. فصبهن على رأسه ثم أفاض على سائر جسده. Right? So he's basically taking the practical means, right? You know, when you've moistened the thing, then the water will spread, right? As opposed to pouring water onto dry hair, it might go in some places, not other places, right? So he's taking the means, he's getting water inside it, so as to make sure that it's going to use less water. أوكي. وحدثنا يوسف بن موسى قال حدثنا جرير عن الأعمش عن سالم عن كريب عن ابن عباس عن ميمونة قالت اغتسل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم غسل فرجه ودلك يده بالأرض أو قال بالحائط ثم توضأ وضوءه للصلاة so this is مفهوم مطلق as he would for prayer, right? So this is to explain ثم توضأ. Why would you say that? Because توضأ is not very clear for them, right? They might not understand what it means. So we understand wudu as a particular ritual. It just means wada'a is to shine, right? Wada'a is to shine. So it's kind of like he would make himself shine. Okay. ثم أفاض على رأسه وسائل جسده ثم تنحى to go to the side from the word نحو direction or ناحية direction. فغسل رجليه for now, right? That's a weak position in the school, right? That we do that. You leave your feet to the end. ثم ناولته خرقة ليتشنف بها أو ليمسح بها فأبى أن يأخذها, right? Shafi'is. So we know that it's not sunnah to dry yourself. وقال بيده هكذا, right? And he shook off the water, right? So Abdullah ibn Salima تفرد به وقد تكلم فيه عمرو بن قال سمعت عبد الله بن سلمة وإنا لنعرف yeah. So what's the problem though in our Usul class? What's the problem with so Ibn Mundhir, what does he do? He has two pieces of evidence. Number one, the hadith that says that the Prophet ﷺ would avoid reciting the Quran in janaba. And he says that hadith is weak. Okay, so that's an issue as a mabhath hadithi. Okay, is it sahih? Is it da'if? That's one discussion. The other discussion, he says, is that the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ كان يذكر الله على كل أحيانه. He used to remember Allah in all of his states, all of his times. Right? So what's the problem there? Okay. What is the problem with that dalil? So the Prophet ﷺ used to remember Allah. Remember Allah means saying Alhamdulillah, saying Subhanallah, includes praying, includes reciting Quran, includes going on Hajj, right? That's dhikr of Allah. Okay? على كل أحيانه, in all of his states. Okay? So the word dhikr of Allah is inclusive of all of these things. So the question is, can we use that as a proof or not? The answer is we cannot. Why? Because al-'am, al-'umum, عفوا, al-'umum min awarid al-alfaz. Because generality is something peculiar and unique to words, not actions. So you say, I went with Farid to the United States and he ate meat. Therefore, it is halal to eat meat in America. Is that true? Farid ate meat in America. Therefore, it is halal to eat meat in America. You say, no, that's not true. Because when Farid ate meat in America, he ate certain meat, right? He only had a certain limited amount of things. Al-'am, when you say every meat in America, you can recite, you can do any kind of dhikr, right? That is a statement. When you say all dhikr is halal in janaba, that means prayer is halal in janaba. That means reciting Quran is halal. But when you say the Prophet ﷺ remembered Allah, he either remembered Allah by doing A or B or C, specific things. So you cannot take an action that is mentioned in a loose and general sense and generalize it. You can't do that. You know, when Farid used to visit Europe, he used to eat cheese. That means I didn't visit every single square meter of Europe, did I? I only went to certain places in Europe, and I ate cheese from certain people and in certain times of certain flavor. So it is not actually universal. So if I say cheese in Europe is halal, that's a universal statement. But he ate cheese in Europe, or when he used to go to Europe, you say, well, he used to go to Europe, so therefore he went to Belgium. That's not true. I've been to Europe. I've never been to Belgium. You know? So when you say he used to go to Europe, that doesn't mean he went to and Europe includes Belgium, therefore he visited Belgium. That's not true. It's not sound logic. So you cannot take an action and generalize it, even if it's mentioned in a general sense. You can only take a word to do that. So he's proof that the Prophet used to remember Allah in all situations, and remembering Allah includes Quran. That's not a dalil. It's not a good proof at all. Right? So now the issue is the hadith, yes or no, right? Does that make sense? And maybe somebody can look in the Muhalla as well, see what Ibn Hazm says, inshallah. Okay, khair. Let's come back to this, inshallah, next week. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.